Montana Territory, 1877. The wind had teeth that morning. Kessler Hart pulled his coat tighter around his chest as he rode along the narrow trail south of Sheepshead Pass, the sky split with low clouds and the smell of pine sharp in his lungs. His horse, Dust, snorted and tossed his head uneasy. Kessler's eyes narrowed. The trail was quiet, too quiet for autumn. No birdsong. No rustle of deer through the brush. Just the sound of hooves over frozen dirt and the creak of leather. Then he saw it. A flash of color off the side of the trail, ripped fabric tangled in the underbrush. He slowed Dust and dismounted, stepping carefully over the brittle grass. He crouched and tugged the cloth free. A dress. Torn badly, the bodice shredded, hem dark with dried blood. Pale blue with a lace edge, the kind a woman might wear to church. Not something you dropped on accident. He scanned the woods. "Hello?" His voice was flat in the cold air. Nothing answered. Kessler tied Dust to a pine limb and followed the faint trail leading away from the fabric. Half prints in the earth. Drag marks. Something or someone had been pulled through here. He drew his rifle and moved quiet, each step deliberate. After 20 minutes he found her. She lay on her side beneath a thicket, curled in on herself like a broken-winged bird. Her arms were scraped raw. Her bare feet were purple with cold. Mud clung to her legs, and her underclothes were torn, but still intact enough to protect what little modesty she had left. Dark hair matted with pine needles fell across her face. He crouched, lowered his rifle. "Miss?" She flinched hard, trying to scramble back, but her leg gave out and she collapsed again with a cry. Her eyes were wide and wild, and her lips cracked from the dry air. "Do not touch me," she gasped. "I will not," he said, slow and steady. "You are safe now. I swear it." She stared, chest heaving. Her body trembled, but she did not look away. He set down his rifle and raised both hands. "My name is Kessler Hart. I am not with whoever did this. I just found your dress by the trail." She blinked fast, her mouth working like she could not find the words. Then, finally, "Edda Calloway." "All right, Edda." He eased off his coat and held it toward her. "You need warmth." "Please." Her hands twitched. Then she reached, quick and embarrassed, and snatched the coat from his hands. She wrapped it tight around herself, fingers clutching the collar. "Were you running?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Are they still after you?" She closed her eyes. "No. They got what they wanted. They left me for dead." His jaw tightened. He did not ask more. She was already carrying enough. "I have a horse. Just up the trail. I can take you to town. There is a doctor in Granger's Hollow. Or a preacher, if you prefer to speak to a woman there." "No," she said sharply. Then softened. "Just take me anywhere but here." He helped her stand without touching her skin, supported her by the coat, careful and quiet. She leaned on him when her knees buckled and did not pull away. Dust shied when he saw her, but Kessler soothed him with a hand on his neck. He lifted Edda gently into the saddle and walked beside the horse, one hand steady on her back to keep her upright. They reached his cabin by sundown. It stood alone near the creek, tucked into the trees, smoke already curling from the chimney. He had left the fire bank that morning. Edda barely looked up as he helped her down and into the warm. Inside, she collapsed on the cot by the hearth. He knelt and unwrapped her feet, careful not to press too hard where the skin was torn. She hissed through her teeth, but did not cry. He brought her water and strips of cloth, and she cleaned herself in silence while he stepped outside, giving her space. When he came back, she was asleep, curled under his wool blanket, still wearing his coat. Her hair fanned over the pillow. He sat in the chair across from her and watched the fire, jaw clenched, heart heavy. He did not know her story. Not yet. But she was here now. Alive. And he would not leave her side. In the days that followed, Edda spoke little. But she did not flinch when he brought her food, and she let him change the bandages on her feet. Her bruises faded. The cuts on her arms scabbed over. She wore one of his shirts, buttoned tight, and a pair of his trousers rolled at the cuffs. They were far too big, but she did not complain. On the third morning, she spoke while he was placing coffee on the table. Her voice was clear, if quiet. They robbed the stage. Killed the driver. There were 2 other passengers, both shot. I ran before they could decide what to do with me. Kessler did not interrupt. They laughed when I fell. Thought I would freeze. I almost did. He met her eyes. You did not. No. She looked at her hands. Because of you. He sat across from her. No one should be left like that. Ever. She held his gaze. You were not afraid? I was angry. Something in her face shifted. Like she had been waiting to hear that. That evening, she joined him on the porch. They watched the sunset in silence. Her hand brushed his on the railing. She did not pull it away. Neither did he. By the end of the week, she was walking again. Still slow, but stronger each day. She helped him chop vegetables, fed the chickens, even mended the strap on his saddlebag. She moved with purpose, like someone reclaiming what had been taken. You live alone? She asked one night, eyes flicking over the tidy space. Always have. Since I left the army. Why here? He thought a moment. Quiet. Clean. No one asking questions. Until I came along. He looked at her. You are not a question. You are an answer. She flushed, and he looked away, not sure what had made him say that. But she smiled. That night, when the fire burned low and the wind howled against the shutters, she crept from her cot and crossed the room. He sat in the chair, eyes half closed. Can I sit here? She asked. He nodded. She folded herself down beside him, shoulder against his. They watched the last embers glow. I did not think kindness still existed. She whispered. It does, he said. You just had to find the trail again. She turned her face toward him. Thank you for staying. I told you. I will not leave your side. Their hands found each other in the dark. Fingers laced. Neither of them let go. The first snow came quiet. It layered the rooftop like breath held too long, softening the hard edges of the world. Kessler shut the door with his shoulder and shook the cold from his coat. Edda stood near the stove, her hands wrapped around a tin mug. She wore a shawl now, stitched from the remnants of a quilt she'd found folded in the bottom of his chest. It hung uneven on her shoulders, but she wore it like armor. You were gone longer than usual, she said. There's ice on the creek where the cattle water. Had to break it. He slid his gloves onto the hook beside the door. 3 of the heifers are favoring their legs. Might be that slope near the bend froze over. She nodded, but her eyes were on his boots. You tracked in blood. He looked down. A thin smear darkened the leather near the heel. Elk, he said. Caught one limping this side of the ridge. Meat'll last us through February. Let me help dress it. You can barely carry the kindling basket. I've got 2 arms and a back that works. I can pull sinew, at least. He hesitated. All right. Come morning, then. We'll haul it together. She gave a short nod and returned to the stove. The firelight painted her face in moving patterns, shadows flickering across her cheekbones. A lock of her hair had come loose and clung to her jaw. She didn't brush it away. Later, when the wind picked up and the shutters rattled, she sat on the floor beside the hearth, sorting thread from a tin. He watched her from his chair, his rifle across his knees, not for need but habit. Did you ever have people? She asked, not looking up. Some, he said. 2 brothers. One went to Kansas after the war, other never came back from it. And your folks? Gone before I enlisted. She held a strip of linen up to the light, inspecting it. I had a sister once. Naomi. She married a man from Illinois who sold harnesses. Went east with him and never wrote again. She laid the fabric in a neat pile. Sometimes I wonder if maybe that was better. He didn't answer. The fire crackled. I keep expecting to feel angry, she said. But it's not anger. It's like I've gone hollow in places I used to be full. Kessler leaned forward, elbows to knees. You don't have to fill it all at once. She glanced at him, quiet a moment. Then, do you ever dream about them? The ones who didn't come back? Yes. Do they speak? No. They just look. Like they're waiting for me to say something. She bowed her head, fingers tightening around the cloth. What do you think they want to hear? He met her gaze. That I made something of it. That the dying bought more than silence. The lantern flickered low. She folded the last strip of linen and set the tin aside. I want to make something of it, she said. Whatever's left of me. You already are. She looked at him then, really looked. Whatever lived behind her eyes had shifted again, less guarded, more grounded. She reached out and touched the edge of his sleeve, light as snow settling on a branch. Will you keep teaching me? I will. That night, she didn't return to the cot. When he lay down, she came to him without a word and curled beside him beneath the blanket. Her hand rested against his chest, steady and certain, and he laid his over hers. The wind moved across the roof, but inside, it was quiet. Come morning, they would walk the ridge together. They would pull the elk down from the trees and carve meat for the winter. They would keep going. Not because they had to, but because they could. The elk meat hung in the smokehouse now, salted and trimmed into long dark strips. Edda had helped with every part of it, hands red from the cold, sleeves rolled to the elbow, her jaw set in quiet determination. Kessler hadn't offered praise. She didn't need it. But when her eyes flicked toward him after setting the last rack in place, he met her glance with a nod, and something steady passed between them. The days shortened. Snow deepened in the hollows. Once, a black bear crossed the far ridge, thick with sleep still in its bones. They watched it from behind the woodpile, either speaking. It moved like a shadow through the spruce and disappeared before the wind picked up again. One morning, with the light just breaking, Edda stood at the window beside the stove, her fingers pressed to the pane. Kessler stepped beside her. There's a rider, she said. Down past the line of cottonwoods, a man on a narrow-legged bay picked his way slow along the creek edge. He wore a thick coat and rode hunched, but he wasn't drifting. He was looking. Marshal's colors, Kessler muttered. Flat-brimmed hat, brass on the saddle. Edda stepped back. You think he's here for me? He's here for something. Won't know what till he speaks it. The man dismounted at the fence line, tied his reins, and walked up the path. Kessler opened the door before he knocked. Morning, the marshal said, breath puffing out in clouds. Name's Eldon Trask. I'm with the circuit out of Helena. Kessler stepped aside. Comin' out the cold. Trask stomped snow from his boots and entered, eyes scanning the room quick and sharp. Edda had taken a seat by the hearth but remained upright, hands in her lap. I've been trailing a pair of highwaymen, Trask said. Stage robbery out of Greystone, 3 weeks back. Driver and 2 passengers dead. 1 woman missing, presumed taken. Word reached Granger's Hollow someone had seen a woman fitting her description riding double up near Sheep's Head Pass. Edda met his gaze. I wasn't taken. I escaped. The marshal blinked, then nodded once. Ma'am, if you're willing to testify, we can hang them both before year's end. I've got names. One of them's already in custody. She said nothing for a moment, then stood. I'll testify. Kessler's jaw shifted, but he said nothing. They'll try to shame you, Trask said gently. Call you a liar. Say you ran off with them. I know what they'll say. Edda replied. Doesn't change what happened. The marshal reached inside his coat and pulled out a folded paper. Trials set for late January. In Helena. Kessler frowned. That's a long ride this time of year. I'll send an escort 2 weeks before. Keep her safe on the road. I don't need an escort, Edda said. I'll take care of myself. Trask's mouth tightened, but he nodded. I'll be back then. After he left, the cabin was still. The fire had burned low again. Kessler stirred it with the poker, then turned to her. You sure? Edda crossed to the table, pulled out a chair, and Saturday. I've been running since I was 17. From men, from talk, from things I couldn't fix. I'm tired of running. Kessler leaned back against the wall. You won't be alone. She looked up. You'll come? He nodded. They spent the rest of the day preparing waxing the saddles, packing salt and oilcloth, checking the horse blankets for rot. Edda stitched new buttons onto one of his coats. He mended the binding on her boots. Neither spoke of the trial again that night. The moon was high when she came to where he lay, the firelight washing her face in warm gold. I thought the worst thing would be remembering it, she said softly. But it isn't. He waited. It's knowing I almost didn't come back at all. That I almost wasn't found. Kessler sat up, resting his elbows on his knees. You were. She nodded, then reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. I don't want to be just what happened to me. You never were. She leaned in, slow and sure, her forehead resting against his. Then let me be something else. With you. He kissed her, gentle but certain, the way a man might plant something in good earth and trust it to grow. Outside, the snow deepened. Inside, it was warm. The sun rose thin and pale over the Helena foothills, spilling its light across the frozen yard outside the boarding house. Coal smoke curled into the brittle air, and below the eaves, icicles hung long enough to whistle in the wind. Edda stood at the window of their upstairs room, her breath fogging the glass as she watched a wagon creak past, the driver hunched low, hat dusted with frost. Kessler packed the last of their gear into the canvas satchel, hands methodical. You don't have to testify an address, he said, not looking up. Her gaze lingered on the street. Already borrowed one from the landlady. Fits well enough. He paused, then nodded once. She turned from the window, smoothing the sleeves of her blouse. Do you think they'll believe me? They'll hear you. That's not the same. He met her eyes. No. But you'll say it plain. That carries weight. Downstairs, boots scuffed against the wood floor. A child called for a mother. Doors opened, closed again. The boarding house breathed around them, full of lives just passing through. You ever been in a courtroom before? She asked. Twice. Once to testify for a rancher whose cattle were being poisoned. Other time was for a soldier accused of shooting his own man in the dark. What happened? Rancher got compensation. Soldier hanged. Edda sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers twisting in her lap. I keep thinking about the way they looked at me. Like I was a thing they'd already owned. Kessler didn't answer. He crossed the room and knelt to lace her boots tighter. One of the loops had frayed. He tied it firm anyway. You'll ride back with me after? He asked. I will. He didn't press further. The courthouse was a stone building with ironwork lamps along the walk. Inside, the benches were full. Men with clipped beards and worn coats leaned forward as she entered, their eyes sharp. A few women sat near the back, shawls pulled tight, expressions drawn. She took her place at the front, hands folded, back straight. Kessler remained at the rear, standing. She didn't look back. The prosecutor's voice was dry but clear. State your name. Edda Calloway. Where were you traveling from? Blakely. Headed to Granger's Hollow. Who else was on the stage? A man named Graham and a younger woman. I didn't know them. Tell us what happened. She did. Carefully. No trembling, no stammer. Her voice didn't rise, but it didn't falter either. When the defense tried to twist her words, she met his questions clean, unflinching. You claim you escaped, the defense said. But you were found alone. No witnesses. No clear proof of pursuit. I have the scars. Which no one saw inflicted. Kessler stepped forward before the judge could stop him. I saw her. The courtroom turned. She was half frozen, torn up, and hiding like a hunted animal. She didn't ride off for adventure. She survived. The judge barked for order, and Kessler returned to the back. But the shape of the room had changed. Later in the hallway, Trask approached them, hat in hand. "They'll deliberate, but it won't take long." "That was clean testimony." Edda nodded. "I'm not waiting for the verdict. You're free to go. I'll wire the outcome." She turned to Kessler as they stepped into the sunlight. "I want to leave before dusk." "We will." They rode out of Helena with the twilight behind them, snow falling soft through the trees. They camped that night near a frozen stream. The fire cracked low, and she sat close beside him, her knees drawn up, blanket wrapped tight. "I kept wondering if I'd feel better after," she said. "But it didn't fix anything." "No. But it finished something." She nodded slowly. "That part of it, at least." He passed her a strip of dried meat. She chewed in silence, then leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thanked you," she said. "You don't have to. I want to." He didn't speak. "You found me when I didn't think I'd be found. You stayed when I couldn't have asked you to. I won't forget that. You don't need to say it." "I do." She turned toward him, her face lit by the fire's edge. Her hand found his, fingers tracing the calluses there. "I want to stay," she said. "Not just for the ride back. Not until spring. I mean stay." He looked at her, quiet a long moment. "Then we'll build something. Together." The wind moved through the trees, rustling the needles. She leaned in, kissed him slow, sure, like one promise answering another. When they lay down that night, her head rested on his arm, her breath warm against his chest. Outside, the world kept turning, cold and wide. But in the shelter of canvas and firelight, they had found something solid. Not an ending. A beginning that would hold. The snow had begun to melt in thin streaks along the southern slopes, revealing patches of brown earth and the first stubborn blades of grass. The ride back from Helena had taken longer than expected. A rock slide near the canyon forced them to camp an extra night, and Edda's horse threw a shoe crossing the shallow ford near Canyon Creek. But neither of them pressed the pace. They moved steady, without hurry, as if the land itself was letting them return piece by piece. On the sixth day, the cabin came into view between the bare-limbed cottonwoods and the still-standing smokehouse. Kessler dismounted first and helped Edda down, her boots landing square in the thawing mud. She looked up at the roof, the shutters, her breath catching faintly. "It looks smaller," she said. He checked the latch on the door. "It'll feel bigger once we're inside again." The hearth still held a few coals under the ash. Kessler stirred them while she unwrapped the oilcloth bundle from the saddlebag and set out what little food remained. He added pine and dry birch to the fire, coaxing it back to life. Light spread slow across the floorboards, touching the worn quilt still folded at the foot of the bed. "I thought it might feel strange," she said, drawing her shawl tighter. "Coming back. But it doesn't." He set the kettle on the stove. "It's yours now, too. That changes things." She crossed to the window. "I'd like to plant something. Once the ground softens. Maybe root vegetables. Beans, if we can keep the deer out. We can build a fence. I'm good with a spade. I've seen it." She turned toward him. "Do you think the quiet will last?" He poured water into the tin basin. "No place stays untouched. But if it changes, it'll be because we're here to shape it." After supper, she stood beside the stove with her hands resting on the back of a chair. "I've been thinking," she said. He looked up from where he knelt near the hearth, brushing ash from the bricks. "I don't want to be called by my family name anymore. Not in town. Not by anyone who might remember what happened." He nodded. "Then you won't be. I was thinking. If it suited you, I could take yours." He stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You sure?" She nodded once. "I'm not asking for a ceremony or papers. Just a name, and the truth beneath it. He stepped closer. You'll have both. She rested her forehead against his chest, her fingers curling into the front of his shirt. Then I want to grow old here. With you. I don't want to pass through. You'll never have to. That night, the wind rose again, shaking the eaves like it had done so many nights before. But it no longer felt like something to brace against. It felt like something to listen to. By late spring, the cabin had changed. Kessler added a second window on the north wall, and Edda stitched curtains from muslin traded in Granger's Hollow. She planted beets and carrots in neat rows, with onions along the edges to keep the rabbits off. He built her a bench beneath the cottonwood, where she sometimes sat with her hands in her lap, eyes on the distant ridge. They went into town only when needed. Folks nodded to her now, some unsure, but none unkind. Trask had sent word by courier, both men convicted, one hung, the other sentenced to life in territorial prison. The letter remained folded beneath the coffee tin, untouched since the day it arrived. Either of them spoke of it. In June, the preacher's wife passed through and offered to marry them proper, with a Bible and a paper seal. Edda looked at Kessler, her eyes steady. I don't need a witness to know what I've chosen, she said. He'd only nodded, and the preacher's wife had smiled and moved on. By autumn, the smokehouse was full again, and a second quilt had joined the first on the bed. They moved through their days with purpose, splitting wood, tending chickens, mending gear, and when the chores were done, they sat by the fire, sometimes reading aloud from the old books he kept in the chest, sometimes just listening to the stove tick as it cooled. One evening, as the leaves turned gold along the creek, Edda stood at the edge of the garden, her hands resting on her belly. I think we'll need another chair, she said. He looked up from the fence post he was shaping and crossed to her without a word. She placed his hand over the curve just beginning to show beneath her apron. I didn't think I'd ever have a life quiet enough to imagine this, she said. He kissed her temple. Then we'll make sure it stays quiet enough to keep it. They cleared space in the back corner of the cabin that week. She began stitching a cradle blanket from scraps of old shirts. He carved the frame for a rocking chair, sanding each rung until it gleamed. Winter would come again, as it always did. But this time, it would find them ready. Not just with food and firewood, but with something deeper, something rooted. And when the snow finally fell over the ridge again, it found a home filled with warmth, with two steady hearts, and the quiet joy of what they had built together. A life not borrowed, not fled to but chosen. Forever.